after giving it my all. Winter storms have come and darkened my sun. After all that I've been through, who on earth can I turn to? I look to you, I look to you. After all my strength has gone, in you I can be strong. I look to you, I look to you. And when melodies are gone, in you I hear a song. I look to you. After losing my breath, there's no more fighting left, sinking to rise no more, searching for that open door. And every road that I've taken led to my regret, and I don't know if I'm gonna make it. Nothing to do but lift my head. I look to you, I look to you. And when all my strength has gone, in you I can be strong.
Good
I look to
afternoon,
you.
and welcome to this episode of Spotlight Conversations. Thank you so much for joining us. We apologize for the delay. We are not in studio today. We are taking advantage of technology, but we are still live. So please feel free to send your messages, send your comments and your questions. And again, don't leave them till late in the conversation. Today, we're talking face value, but officially be by. And it's especially as kids, how do we deal with singleness? What are the different forms of singleness out there, and how many different ways people are single? And also just how do we actually navigate that space? What does the Bible say about it? So we want to have a general conversation about it. So we do have our resident pastor who's going to bring us that voice of wisdom and the biblical view. But we also have people who have walked this way or are currently in this space, and we want to have real conversation about what they're experiencing now. So I've got two young ladies, as you can see. I've got Tunobile and I've got Caesar. We're going to talk from that perspective in terms of just what's happening right now in the landscape. I myself am to carry myself as well. I'm not married. I haven't never been married, and I'm in my 40s, so I definitely can pitch into this conversation. And then we've also invited Upesi. Now we need a male voice, right? But we also needed a voice who has experienced singleness as well. And he is married, but he was considered a senior single for a while in our church circle. So he can definitely talk from that perspective as well. So Mfundisi, I want to start off with you. Let's just start off by, what are we talking about when we talk about singleness? What are the different ways that people are single?
When we look at singleness, we are talking of a phenomenon that is universal. It's found in all cultures, but it varies with cultures, places, opportunities, challenges, and spiritualities as well. In African culture, singleness was respected to a certain extent. We're never told, for instance, that the aunt of King Ushaga was married, Umkabai. We're not told. One wants to assume that she could have been a single senior person who had amassed enough maturity and experience to advise a king. But in Africa, because we historically come from what is called in sociology a fertility culture, singleness gets problematized because at a certain stage, a woman or a man is expected to have been married, to bear children. Productivity, biological productivity in African cultures is very central to who you are, to the extent that sometimes when community discussions are held, your voice as a single man or single woman might not be taken because, as people used to say to me before I married, umfana uzositshelani. You see that type of thing. So singleness in a fertility culture tends to be sneered at and gets interpreted in ways that are discriminatory, undermining, and sometimes even shameful. I have a relative of mine who, for instance, used to say to a close friend, when some of us had made an error in church, would say, awuzobathini abafana abangenamadoda abangenamakhosikazi ndoda, why did you delegate this duty to abafana? So we became boys until we got married, even though we were older than other boys who would have fitted that title. So the question of singleness gets defined in three ways now. Fine, culturally, with variations in from one place to another. It also gets defined in terms of new social cultures, and it also gets defined biblically. So in this discussion, we may perhaps go into those three dimensions. I don't know if I should go to the various kinds of singleness now and explain.
Yes, but before that, I just wanted to find out, when you say new social cultures, what are you referring to?
I'm referring to a culture where the institution of marriage has been decentered. For instance, in a post-industrial, colonized culture, such as we have in South Africa today, women can stay long as single persons if they have physical or financial assets. Education being one of them, for instance, which in some cases, in many cases in the African community, may lead to what we call extended singleness among women. If I don't have a degree and there's a woman I fancy in church who's impressed me aesthetically and morally, I may not be so keen to talk to her if she has a master's and I have a junior certificate, because men tend to assess other people in terms of material wealth. And in the context of matrimony, men regard literacy, academic literacy, as one of these factors. I'll tell you why. And this is a negative thing we need to extract from how we bring up boys. Men tend to shy away from women who have got assets, intellectual, social, financial, and material that they don't have. So if you have a PhD and I have a BA, yeah, I love you, but one day you may tell me where to get off. You get the point. Because I'm your junior academically, and I might bring 10 rand while you bring 50 rands as a salary. So one of the major issues I would wish the church to do, because we can't solve the society, is to doctor men. Men, I'm telling you now, are frightened by women's success and wealth. When a woman has wealth and is academically successful and has titles, how will I start?
But
Because she will size me up.
Yes, I'd just like to comment on that. There's this culture that when we grow up, you go to school and you go to church, and if depending on which church you're affiliated to, you go to Sunday school. You're a good boy or a girl in Sunday school, or you go to church on a Saturday. You join, all the classes that are there. You graduate from them. You graduate from high school. You go to university. You get yourself a job, and then there's one thing that is missing: ushataning. And you go around you know, and you when you go home, you are asked, Ushatanini, where's your partner, where's your boyfriend, or where's your girlfriend? You come to church, it's the same kind of setup. You've achieved going through a school, getting a job, and now there's a missing link, and everybody views that as a missing link. And you grow up in this uncomfortable space that when you go home, you're going to be asked for shatani. You come to church, it's also an uncomfortable environment. But when are you going to get married? And besides that, you know, you don't have even a voice when you go to church, because you're not even married, you're still single. So you are viewed as this person who has a handicap. So being single at times is viewed as having a handicap. When you go for an interview or get a job, you're never asked to shatani. And that's the only environment where you grow up. It's very comfortable. You're only asked, where's your report? Where is this? Where's this? When are you getting your next promotion? And you're never viewed as being, as having a handicap or being half man or half woman because you're not married. You can be very powerful in your own job, you know, go get a promotion, be a good leader, be a good role model to other people. But it never applies when we are emphakathini or when you come to church. Abantu bazokumamela bathini when you're single. It's like when you meet a strong single woman. No, she speaks that way because she doesn't have a partner. When you're a man, no, but you speak this way, uzostelani, because you're not you are half person. You're not a whole person. So and we need to move away from those kind of myths and notions that you're not a complete person because you're not married.
So thanks for that, Percy. And I think that's a nice position to start at. But I want to bring in Sizo or when Nangobile here to say, I can relate to what Mfundisi and Percy are saying, but also I'm thinking maybe it's also a generational thing. So as you know, growing up in the 80s and then in the 90s, and all of that, that was the expectation. Is that still the expectation now because as Mfundisi has termed it, we are in the new social cultures. Things are different. Is there still that pressure? Are you guys still experiencing the pressure that we, when we were much younger, experienced about ushadani?
Yeah, no, do you want to go first or should I?
You can go, V.
Oh, okay. I definitely agree with what has been said. Being in a relationship, or rather being married, is seen as a level of success, because I know for a fact within the church circles or even within my family, in as much as I've gone to school and I've attained my degrees and I'm working and I'm driving, I am still deemed unsuccessful because I'm not yet married. So the question still pops up, you know, all those questions. And it's just like, I'm trying to live my best life, being single and happy. And I think even after leaving matric and going to the STASM environment, because our church is so family orientated, no one really focuses on developing good, righteous single people. Everyone is just trying to get, especially the elders, they're trying to get the youngins into relationships to the point where when you're in a relationship, whether it lasts for a year or 2 years, you're already being called by the surname of your partner at the time. And it puts pressure on you, whether things are going good or they're not going good, to kind of maintain the relationship and to maintain that social status that's being upheld in the church circles. You know, Caesar's dating Peter, for instance, you know, Mako Pete and stuff like that. And so it takes away that time when we're in STASM and when we're young, it takes away then the experience of actually getting to know yourself as a person and getting to deal with yourself as a person and an individual, to see what do you want from life and where do you want to go. So I guess still within in this generation and in this time, unfortunately, being in a relationship is seen as a level of success.
Mm-hmm. And Norile, does it make it worse being a pastor's child? Or are you somehow insulated from that?
No, I think we all have the same pressures. Now you're looking for marriage, now it's time to get married. And the funny thing is, this week I was reminded by someone that I grew up with the same age, and he was reminding me of our age and saying, but more it's time you have a child. So we get these pressures not only from other people, but, amongst ourselves, because you look around, somebody like the person I'm saying, we grew up together, he has 3 kids. And basically now, but what are you waiting for? What's going on with you? And you automatically feel like maybe I'm behind, wrong. So but I also wanted to say that my experience in dating is the men aren't intimidated. It almost feels like they ask you, so what are you doing with your life? Then you say, no, I'm studying, I'm doing this. And they're like, oh, then they take interest, because now all of a sudden, girl is trying to get, the girl is studying, doing something while now he wants to further the conversation. So I think the dynamics have changed. It seems that the men want more, educated women now. They want, I'm not sure if it's to secure themselves as well in life, but you do see the dynamics changing, that there's more women breadwinners, and the guys even are looking at a younger age to see, okay, she's studying to be a doctor. Let me, get closer to that person. So we have those dynamics and we have those pressures. So what do we do, Thandi?
Well, that's an interesting one, Fundisi. So do you think that our young men especially are realizing, or I don't want to say abdicating because that's the wrong word, but I wanting to step back from the pressure of having to take care of a potential spouse by now looking at what are you doing with your life, rather than running away from the woman who's doing something with her life. Do you think this new generation that we're finding ourselves in, that's where they are at? And I think maybe just as you're thinking about that, also stats are showing more and more that a lot of the young men now have been raised by single parents, single mothers, either for whatever reason, the father could have been there but working in the mines and not physically present all the time. So they know what a strong woman who's providing and taking care of things actually looks like, and maybe that's what they've normalized.
Sorry, yeah. Thandi, can I interject there before the pastor comes in? The other notion that we need to move away from is that you can still be happy and single. Being with somebody should not be perceived as making you happy or whole.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's one of the things that we want to expand on. Thanks, Percy, for that. Fundisi,
before I deal with the question, I just want to list the various levels or kinds of singleness. Okay. We talk about natural singleness. No one is born married. We then talk about extended singleness. Extended singleness is singleness that occurs beyond a specific age, when society or a culture or religion expects you to have been married. But it may be interfered with by a number of things. You might be too ill to get married, or physically handicapped. It might be caused by the fact that you are pursuing a particular profession, whatever, which may be interfered with or disturbed or punctuated by a marriage. We also have what is called married singleness. There are persons who are married, but they feel single, because they're not given the attention by their spouses for particular reasons, one of them being the fact that we are differently socialized. Sometimes I have a suspicion that the drive towards matrimony has very little to do with development, rather than with seeking to satisfy a private need. Then we have widowed singleness. It's obvious. And then finally, divorce singleness. Widowed singleness, or both widowed and divorce singleness, may terminate depending on factors. For instance, if you divorce at the age of 60, let's say of 20 or 24, there's a possibility that you might remarry. But if you're going to divorce at the age of 50, you may stay single for the rest of your life. It also depends on the culture in which you grow up. The one thing, though, that I would wish the church to do, based on the input I've received and studies I made when I was doing sociology in 2 universities, we need to create a new discourse around what it means to be human, what it means to be a person, what it means to be single, what it means to be married. Because the increase of marital destruction by a number of forces today is forcing many of us into natural singleness, extended singleness, or post-marital singleness because of divorce and other things, death, for instance. And so we need a new curriculum now that has to define what it means to be human. Can you be a single and be fulfilled? Can you be single and whole? Is the commandment therefore a man shall cling to his wife, whatever? Was that a fiat God wanted us to live by for the rest of our lives? Why was Jesus not married? You get a point. Some of the disciples did not have wives. And singleness, by the way, is not a new thing in the history of the world. Look at the Catholic system that has sort of emphasized singleness under very suspicious conditions, though. So I would want to end up with the fact that we need a curriculum that will arrive at making people single but bold and confident and chaste. Because one of the problems of singleness,
yes, I agree with you,
is that you are single but you're experienced. Do you hear me? Very of us marry virgins, both sides. Yeah, very of us marry virgins, both sides. So we've compromised our singleness when we have tasted married life before the ceremonies. And today, particularly in a country such as South Africa that is postmodernizing in what I would call a very un-African and unbiblical way, talking about chastity today, premarital chastity, is going to become a very tabooed ideal. And it's also coming into the church, unfortunately. Very few of us can find virgins among males and among women in the church. Thank you.
Just can you bring us in and talk about what is the biblical purpose for marriage? So when we talk about marriage from the biblical perspective, because I mean, it starts from the Garden of Eden. We see God bringing Eve to Adam and saying it's not good for men to live alone. So beyond that, what do we take from that? Is that, I think you've already sort of suggested it's not an imperative, but what is the purpose from a biblical perspective of marriage?
We have not expanded what this aloneness means. We need to deal with the sociology of the singularity and its theology or ethics, because I may decide to get married for the wrong reasons, just so that the church, the pastor, and society feel I've complied with an institutional or communal norm, and fail to manage the marriage. So many of us have fractured relationships with people who have married because we were heeding a call from our culture, our relatives, and the society in which we grow up. All of us have got this lingering idea that one day I'm going to get married. But we have not examined the reasons why we need to get married, because marriage is bigger than procreation, because I can procreate as a single person. So sin has brought in some paradigms that disturb the original plan of God for men to create families that will be intact and exemplary in the scheme of salvation history, and also be able to take care of offspring. Because we all know from studies in sociology that children who grow up without fathers, for instance, without parents, tend to develop particular behaviors or reactions or views about life that may not be accepted in a particular culture, particular institution, and so on. Which is why every young person who comes into the Adventist church without a family, without parents, needs some specialized attention, which may develop that person's confidence and be able to have the necessary, to go into the necessary growth path, either into maturity or into marriage. What we then do as corrupt men, we take advantage of the fact that we know that you have got physical needs, and we then make maneuvers to try and service you without any long-lasting commitment.
Can I bring in I'll bring in the in-person. From a guy's perspective, a lot of us women are raised programmed for marriage, right? We are trained to, we play with dolls, we cook in the kitchen, we play mummies and all of that. And boys are almost encouraged to go and explore and find themselves there, right? So when does this pressure to get married actually start? Does it start as young as it does for women?
It depends on your, I believe it depends on your environment. Our parents, got married or used to get married when they were in their 20s. And, you finish school in, let's say, you finish your first degree, you're 24, 25. The expectation is there that, hey, where's your, thing? Are you looking at getting married? Are you with, someone? Are you seeing, someone? And then when you get to, your late 30s and 40s, what is your problem? It's as if it's perceived to be a problem. Are you not able to, to propose, or and then you get names, you get attached to names as Wishiman, Awazushela, you can't, you can't date, and even to an extent where people say, do you want us to talk, to a certain lady, on your behalf, because you can't do it. And it's also the same pressure, I believe, that applies to, to women, because now if people don't see you with a woman or a young lady, you are perceived to be a failure. Yes, you have succeeded in your career and doing other things, and you're perceived to be successful in what you're doing in your private life. But this part, you're perceived, as a failure. I mean, there was one time I remember, quite well, my father said, "How Mfanam, come, let us talk. You don't have a child. There's nobody who has come home as a big sis. What is your problem? Do you want us to talk about this thing?" And then how, Mfanam, I angiboni any progress ukuthi financial lobola. Do you want us to talk in? Is there a problem? And to such an extent, well, I'm not too sure who's watching, but there's certain words that maybe I shouldn't repeat. Or is that impensele yakhona kubhala yini kahle, because there are no kids coming forth. Yes, maybe you don't want to get married, or you're not getting married soon enough, but at least there must be children. So once those things are not there and you're focused in another area, it's believed also that maybe, or there is a problem.
And Percy,
could I add something there?
Yes, yes.
I want to confirm what Percy has just said. You persons don't know how pressured we are when we go into what we call extended singleness. I was already in extended singleness when I got married. I was employed as the education director of the TOC at the time. And I remember the pastors in the TOC would say, you are a bachelor in chief.
Yes, yes.
Number one, number two, bachelor in chief. Two, one time, Pastor Bandla said to me, brother, well, we don't want to see with girls. Propose them through the phone. I said, that thing won't work. It's culturally off. It will not work. And one of my aunts said, I doubt if you'll ever get a child now. You know, some people came to my wedding primarily to see if I was really getting married.
It was really happening.
So there's a challenge with extended singleness, which is brought by the African fertility culture. In Africa, you are not complete until you have given birth, which is the reason why there's a lot of illegitimacy in the African community right now. And it's exacerbated by the fact that we've been colonized. We need things. We find our fulfillment in delivering what we regard as the totality of being human, that of being a parent of somebody. And in the process, the society is also fracturing because we're doing the right things at the wrong time, sometimes with the wrong people.
Yeah. Percy, I wanted to just ask you here, because you keep on referring to pressure, like questions from Abadala. How much pressure was coming from your peers, and how much of that was also you pressuring yourself, having internalized it now?
Well, personally, I wasn't pressured, at all. And the very fortunate part I had was I had a father who was understanding, and who said, take your time, and when the right time and moment comes, you will do it at your own pace. And unfortunately, I had a mother who didn't subscribe to that. When are you getting married? How? There's so many ladies in church. Why aren't you choosing from there? And I at that time, I didn't go to church in order to look for a woman. I went to church, for other things, to seek spiritual fulfillment. So, my mother was not of that view that you should take your time. You get relatives who will keep poking and pushing and poking. When are you getting married? You get friends too who say no, but you must move away from from this from this singleness. And then you get to a point where even friends say, no, but we can't invite you to our functions or to our events because we're all married and you're the only single one.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because I think, and ladies, please come in here. I think in our conversations, we generally, and maybe I'm generalizing here, we generally associate a lot of this pressure with us women and not men. We don't necessarily see it from the male perspective because we think, a man can get married. I mean, people can still at 70 be having children. Me, even as soon as 35, 36, 37 knocks, the biological clock is already like, I guess this was our adopter maybe or something. And so we tend to think there's a lot more pressure for us women, and maybe that's why we may be even a bit more vocal about it or a bit more expressive about it than not. But I wanted to ask you ladies, how real is that pressure of age and the biological clock for you?
Sorry, Tandy, before they respond, can I interject there? There's this, notion that the pastor, touched on, that you get to a certain point where you've got to have a child, and you eventually have a child to get people off your back, or pressure, or you realize your biological clock is ticking. And my question there is, so what if your biological clock is ticking? it also takes with men. And the thing is that if you want to get married or move out of being single into the marriage life at a later stage, what is wrong in adopting a child?
Hey, you're talking to a group of Africans here. Ladies, come in. Come in, let's talk about this. There's a pressure. The pressure with, yes, there's pressure with men and women, but I think the added issue, the reality of aging for women, your eggs are aging. You may likely then get children who are, who have these illnesses and all of that, related to the fact that as you get older, your eggs do get older as well. How much pressure is that putting on you when you look at your age? Years are rolling. Mobile friends have got 3 kids already, and you're sitting there thinking, I know, in God's time, you be at 50, and you're thinking, I get late. Your thoughts on that, just the reality of age and biology in this conversation.
There was a stage where it didn't affect me as much, but I'm fortunate enough that most of my close friends are also single, so it's not something that we pressure each other into. But recently, one friend was telling me we need to start looking into, freezing eggs, and because clearly, there's nothing that's happening now. So we need to look at our options about freezing eggs, and then it hit me. It's like, okay, I look younger, I don't look my age, but the age is still there. So what do we do? Should we start considering adoption? Do I start looking at freezing my eggs? And I'm sitting next to my mother, and she's automatically saying, "Hi, So what do we do now? If I can't be freezing eggs, I can't be adopting. What are my options?"
Yeah, V.
I share the same sentiments with Mobile. My circle of friends, we're all single. The pressure right now to get married is not something that's on our mind. I think if I look at my circle of friends, the biggest focus now is to look at how we can deal with our childhood traumas, because most of us don't come from happy homes, in a sense that, and I say happy in inverted commas because it can be unhappy even if both parents are present. So we're looking at the idea of how can I make sure that I don't transfer my childhood traumas into the life of my children that I have desired to have in future. And basically the psychological traumas, our daddy issues, our mommy issues, just basically focusing on making sure that you are whole as a person, where what needs fixing, what needs attention, basically. And that's what we are focusing on in our singleness journey, basically. So the pressure for me, personally speaking, it's not there, but I guess it's different at different ages, because I'm 28 and my sister is 35. So the pressure for her to get married is much more on her side than it would be for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like how you talk as if it is going to happen. So you're not looking at it from a position of if it does happen. You're saying when it does happen, and that's the optimism that we carry until, as said, then it looks now extended. Like where I was at a stage where I was looking that it's still coming, but now I'm at a stage where I'm like, okay, it should have happened by now. At least it should be knocking by now. And maybe that's where the pressure comes in. When we look at single people, two key things that come up that really become maybe a bother and can feed into this pressure is, number one, it's the loneliness, especially when people start coupling off. I mean, Percy, I can relate so much to, even if they don't not invite you, you don't want to go to functions where you're going to be the single person in the room, and your friends, because shame, they don't want to leave you out. Or then, which I think is even worse, then they invite some potential single person so that at least you're not, oh, an odd one out there. And it makes it so awkward because maybe this person is not who you would have chosen to hang out with. So loneliness is real. And I think also because we've moved away from extended families, we stay on our own, we have our own places, our social circles are not as broad as they would have been if we were still staying, in our family homes, for example. And then the issue of sexuality as well, because we can't run away from the fact that biologically my body has needs and wants things, and I go through, stages where I am quite like, okay, Lord, where is my Boaz right now? And how do we navigate that? How do we navigate the need for sexual fulfillment whilst you're waiting on God? Because you spoke about teaching people how to be chaste, and I'm very curious to take that angle. And how do we navigate the actual loneliness, the need for companionship and intimacy at that level?
I'm weighed down by a conviction now that we have not done full church as the Bible would expect us. And we have not done sufficient mission to individuals. We have often evangelized groups and communities, but we have not spoken to the needs of the individual. You see, in the postmodern era, the individual has become an institution. We still define the individual in the context of a community. In modern life, people can stay as individuals and be happy alone, right? I want to propose, Tandy, that beyond this discussion, we influence, the church perhaps may not go for this, that some of us form a new organization within Adventism that's going to deal with what it means to be human, what does it mean to be Christian, and to deal with aspirations of people. You see, you and I are talking about singleness now in the context of an advanced social culture. Our parents were evenly grown. They came from a unitary culture. There was a chief, there were krals, there was a common practice in terms of occupation. Boys knew they would look after cattle, and they knew that after some time they would get married and so on, become part of the community in Dabas. Life was generally fixed and predetermined. We now live in a situation where everything is helter-skelter. You come from the Eastern Cape, I come from the Northern Cape, I come from KZN, we come from all over with variant models of socialization, and I think education also has come in to develop new aspirations for us. The result is that we are in a church that has failed to speak to young people. You see, the youth ministry program for the United States has not spoken to the African youth in South Africa. We have assumed relevance of it, but it just doesn't make the grade. So we need to develop a more localized program now of dealing with the issues that affect us as Kelvin, as Orlando West, as Santin, and so on. And we need to stop globalizing who we are, because I'm not in North America, I'm not in Calcutta, I'm not in Australia, I'm in South Africa. I need to be able within my lifespan to deal with those things and to contribute to the solution of challenges that exist within my spiritual realm, my professional realm, and whatever other things impact on my life. Because ultimately, when the master of life comes back, he'll not be asking all these questions that we're asking. But in the process, we need to provide answers to youth. For instance, let me tell you something that bothers me. And I'm going to express this one because I'm very artistic. I'm visually oriented. That's one thing I have. I appreciate things I see. And I think that's why I was better at geometry than in algebra at school, because in geometry, deal with forms and structures. There's a lot of beauty in our church, a lot of beautiful women in the church. Many, far more than you can think. Some are even married. I'm going to be rough now. There are many beautiful women in this church. Some are in Kelvin, but all over. So you sit there in church, she's reciting. I'm saying some because they are all over. So yeah, I'm not saying so. You sit in church there, and this person is there singing in a group or speaking, and you hear with one eye, and the other eye says, "What is in front of me now, Mr. Emotions? Do you see what is in front of me? It's more than just the missions reading. There's a human being there, and what if I can take her out?" Or you see all those things. I suspect that women also have that thing. We call it sexual. There's a term we use in psychology. Sexual Sexual transference in psychology, yes.
Okay.
Sexual transference. And this is how it works. There are people whose personality profile fits your terms of who you are looking for in marriage. And you might tend to gravitate towards those persons initially on a innocent social level. But there's also an open door that might lead to intimacy in terms of relationships. And let me give a practical example. My wife, for instance, is shaped in a manner that fits a particular profile in my mind. I grew up knowing that when a woman looks like that to me, she's fine. For instance, I don't like round heads. To me, a round head is ugly. You get the point? When the head is round, I don't talk. I don't even think. I pass. So we're discussing a very complex issue here. And I think we need to enter into a discussion, even at congregational level, to explain the reasons why we end up committing particular sins with a particular type of woman and with a particular type of man. Because as the years go by, life is becoming more and more complex. Let me state to you another thing that has developed in the TOC now. You may not be aware of this. There's a group of women who went to the TOC sometime last year. They hoped to talk to the president. Are you aware that in the TOC now there are secret polygamous marriages? There are men now who have more than one wife. I'm telling the truth. But the second one or the third one are not known officially, but they are known culturally by relatives. There's polygamy in the TOC now. There are even women now who argue if it would help them to keep one husband. You see, because we are late in discussing these issues. We've been talking the discussions of theologians, righteousness by faith, sanctification by grace. All this, those things don't make up what people really need. People want to eat breakfast, they want to eat lunch, they want to eat supper, they want to go to school, they want to be sure that they are successful in life, they have a car, they have a house, they have money, and all those things. The church is not dealing with the existential realities of what it means to be human. Masturbation is rife in the camps. Rife in our camps, rife in our lives. There are many people who are single, but they're engaging in sexual relations with themselves. What we do is what is called self-referencing. Masturbation, for instance. There are people who will not talk to a woman, who will not even allow men to talk to them, but they enjoy the conjugal rights of those who are married. Because, there's a time when your body says, I want it. But if I don't have anyone with whom I can do it, I'll do it on myself.
So that's
I know I've complicated the issue now, but it's broad. It's a complex issue.
I think that's the gist of what my question was, is to say, how do we equip unmarried, and I don't want to say young, because unmarried is not just young.
Yes, yeah.
But how do we equip people who are not yet married, who are longing for that intimacy, whether it's physical intimacy or the emotional intimacy, and there's no outlet for it? Or sometimes it's just purely a biological imperative. It's that time of the month, my hormones are haywire, really. And I can't pretend there's no switch to switch it off until I'm married. So how do we help people to navigate that space? I think is the biggest reality, because then we may then end up getting married for all the wrong reasons. Running away from the pressures of singleness than rather running towards the joys of marriage. So how do we, and then also my question as you think about that is, Paul in 1 Corinthians 7 refers to singleness as a calling and as a gift. Is it? Is it a calling? Is it a gift? Are there special people who are called to be single? And some of us maybe are just stuck with callings.
Let me tell you something. You may or may not know Umfundisi Ntwana, who died in Umtata some years ago. He was speaking a marriage in Newcastle and said, actually, who destroyed polygamy? Because even the Bible does not destroy polygamy. Let me give you a historical reality. Jews were polygamous until the Roman Empire occupied Israel and said, stop the rubbish. So the Bible never stopped polygamy, neither did God stop it. It was the Roman law that said we no longer want polygamy. because Jews are African people. They practice, you say what we're practicing before 1652 is rooted in the Bible. You got the point? What we need now is a new discourse in the African church. Righteousness by faith, sanctification by grace, all those things are not pertinent to my real life. Because as I walk out of here, I'm going to see a woman here who looks like, you. What's all this now? God, please protect my sanctification. I thought I was righteous until I read the Sabbath school lesson. Now I've gone to the shop, and here is this thing. What do I do? And that's why David prays for meditations. May you sanctify. We have not dealt with the phenomenon of sin and human fallenness in the church. But perhaps the COVID period is giving us time to rethink and to say, where's the debris? Let's keep this. We need. Unfortunately, many churches are not going to do this thing. We need to recalibrate what it means to be an Adventist in the post-COVID period.
Am I hearing you correctly to then say you may propose polygamy as a response to?
Not necessarily. I've got suggestions about how we should deal with who we are. They are propositions rather than approach. We may design a project around it, but seeing that women far outnumber us, I don't know how we're going to stop infidelity, even in the church, because I can tell you, some of these women in the church, even those who are younger than us, man, are a problem artistically. To some of us, you sit there reading the number of the song for the pastor, and you look into the congregation, you feel, I'm not going to be saved in this church. You get a point? You know what I mean?
No, I hear you. It's that it's that practical reality of being a human being and saying, Can I just bring you in here, Percy? And I'm worried about time. We're already running out of time. As a person who is now married and was in what Mfundisi terms extended singleness, what advice would you give to someone who is still single in extended in terms of they want to get married, but for whatever reason they're not yet married, to stick it out, to not rush and make the wrong decisions or rushed decisions? How would you advise someone to navigate this space?
For me, Tandy, I think the best advice that I ever got is that you don't rush into the process and don't be pressurized by anybody. And the thing is that you as a single person, when you move from singleness to marriage, you think life. First, deal with yourself and fix yourself before you move and jump, to the next, to the next stage. Because we tend to jump into the next stage. You haven't sorted out yourself. You haven't fixed yourself, and therefore you jump to the second stage and create problems for somebody else. And now this person is having to deal with a child or somebody who hasn't decided that this is what they want, and this is, and they want to, finally, as things, settle down. And the thing is that how do you know that you've met and found that person that you want to be with? And for, a friend of mine told me, there's no formula, but you will know deep down inside that this feels right. This is whom I want to be with. And finally make that move.
Yeah. So really
I just wanted to sidetrack a bit and go back to the part that the pastor said of the various stages of single people. And my feel, or and you can actually see it, is that the numbers are growing for people who are single, whether it's by choice or whether it's out of choice or due to circumstances. Those numbers are growing, and yet you don't see a ministry developing within our conferences, to deal with this phenomenon, and have a fully fledged, you have a fully fledged department for family life, for married people who have families, but you don't have a fully fledged department to deal with this growing phenomenon, and to assist people, whether it's by choice or whether it's due to circumstances. And why don't we have that?
Yeah. And I mean, that's a great question there. I want to bring you in here, ladies, then I'll bring you in for this. I think also there's a sense of, just as a church and even us as individuals, treating singleness as transit. You are part, you singleness, and
Yes.
the ultimate destination is getting married. And it's only when you realize that this train is not stopping that it starts becoming an issue. While there's a sense of it will stop, I think a lot of us are okay with even extending it when there's no, but you are going to get to the destination. Ladies, as we start, winding down, what are you picking up from this conversation about just how to help you navigate the space that you're occupying right now, with minimal pressure, with minimal expectations? How is this equipping you really to deal with the pressure from outside that may be coming through, but also yourself and your own expectations of yourself?
Well, the lessons that I'm picking up are that, don't let external circumstances pressure you into something. What I would have, and I was gonna ask Tandy, is like, okay, so, and V, I think, touched on this a bit earlier. She said, fine, so when I'm not single and I'm dating, then you get that pressure of, can you guys get married? When you getting married? You get those questions, which then leads us now to start in relationships. Then there's these new terms like, oh, DL, can we date on the DL? Can we do this on the side? Or you get guys who tell you, I'm not a relationship person, but, we can try, or let's be friends with benefits. So how do we now navigate? I get the singleness, we've covered that part, but how do I navigate the dating life now within, the compound of church, and still keeping true to God and, keeping my body pure as well?
Yeah. And I think that's a topic that requires its whole session on its own, G.
Yeah.
From your perspective, what is this conversation saying to you as a young single person who is still looking to get married but doesn't want to succumb to pressure unnecessarily?
Yeah, I think like for instance, as I'm just listening to everyone speak, is that we definitely have to focus more on making sure that we are okay as individuals, as singles, before we merge into relationships, because marriage is not like work where if I'm not happy, I can just quit and jump onto the next train and get rehired for what I've been studying for. There's so much involved. There's families, there's friendships, there's a level of emotion that is involved in just being in a relationship and committing as well. So I think as much as possible, and that's the path that I'm on right now, and you can't, of course, you can't get everything right, but to the level of your the best of your ability, to make sure that you're well equipped for what you want. If it's marriage that you want, you equip yourself for marriage. If it's singleness that you want, you equip yourself for it as well, and try your best to be an individual who's going to positively impact your society as a whole, whether it be in church, work, or family. But yeah, I think it's more important for us to actually focus on what it means to be a good quality individual within our single state, despite our relationship status.
Yeah, thank you for that. I've got a comment from Uma Togoza as we start winding down. He says, Pastor, I think you've hit it on the nail right there. What Adventists deem as present truth might not be so present after all. we should focus on what affects us in the present. And I think that's the key, isn't it? Is that is what we talk about at church really relevant to my everyday life? Not to my one day going to heaven life, but is it relevant to my everyday life? When is it, as we start winding down, I wanted to actually ask this. So Christ in Mark, I think Mark 12 talks about the fact that there'll be no marriage in heaven. Will there be marriage in the new earth?
Yeah.
Turn right on.
And also, what about those who are married? What's going to happen if you're married and you go to heaven?
You pray, you go together, right?
I guess, yeah.
Very bad, go together. Will there be bed stuff there? Will there be bedroom stuff there? I don't know. Let me tell you something. The Bible says, "I have not seen, no ear heard." But yeah, you see, these questions arise because we're going through a crisis, and we need to be bold enough to deal with them. Let me tell you something that should help us think more serious about this thing. Do you know that only 17% of the church membership globally comprises persons who grew up in the church? Only 17%. The rest are converts. And they've brought baggage, cultural baggage, which they never disclose. Some have got strings tied to their loins. Some have other things that are tattooed, even if it might not be in their bodies, but in their thought system, in their cultures. They bring these things, and we assume that because they're baptized, nothing wrong has happened. Let me tell you something. I think we need to accept the fact that we are Christians on an individual basis. I choose Christ, and Christ knows the baggage I'm bringing to him. The church has become too much of an organization rather than of a community. I want to propose that we seriously consider the creation of a program that I would call personal integrity program, where we could teach disciplines that fit into developing a person as a full individual, also as a committed Christian, also as a saint waiting for the return of Jesus Christ. Because when he comes back, he will not ask the question, were you ever married or did you divorce? He'll want to know if you're faithful to my will. I think we have overstayed around the Euro-American curriculum in the church. We need to allow Adventism to speak to us in our context as African people, because we certainly have needs that the church has not dealt with. The Adventist church never dealt with African culture because it simply considered it heathen, and so it castigated us. And then you find after some time that your culture keeps calling you back. Pastors, for instance, some of them are heavily culturally embedded. When sessions come, they go to charlatans to be doctored so that they can be elected and so on. How do you know that even in a local church, there are people who go to traditional doctors to be elders and all these other things? So we've talked about the second coming outside of what it means to prepare for it. My proposition is that we curricularize our thinking. And that's the major difference between, by the way, Africans and Europeans. Africans discuss an idea and trash it. Whites create a curriculum around a program. That is why many of us have gone to white-created institutions in this country, in our own continent. Whites institutionalize an idea so that they can create a curriculum around it and progress into the future. This is my proposal around this discussion.
Thank you so much, Mfundisi. I think key things that I'm taking out there is that there needs to be a discourse around the individual and the individual's everyday needs and everydayness, more than the broad issues that we actually talk about, which are also quite important, but don't always then accommodate what the everyday need is. And as we finish off, so I did check on Stats SA because we also tend to use the stats which create this scarcity mentality around us about that there are more women than men. And so not every woman who wants to get married will get married. Here are the stats and you can check for yourself. Globally, yes, globally, there's more men than women. 50.44% men versus 49.56% female. And this is, of course, across the different ages. In South Africa, there are 51.1% female versus 48.9% male. the gap is not that big, really. So this scarcity argument that people put through that, well, firstly, they use it for polygamy, but they also use it to put pressure on women to say they're not enough men, Then they'll say they're in jails, they're women in jail. They're gay, they're women who are gay. So all of that argument does not actually... But
we
also,
are safe.
We're safe, guys. There's no pressure
safe.
because the numbers are on your side. Secondly, the average marriage age of registered marriages now has actually increased. So by 2019, the average age for men is between 36 and 37 registered official marriages, and for women it's between 31 and 33. So again, the pressure of in your 20s you should be getting married is not a practical thing anymore. People are getting married older and older as compared to, let's say, our parents and our grandparents. So the two young ladies on this call, you still have time, right? You still have no pressure. But most importantly, and I think this is a nice one to finish off on,
thank you.
Again, that theme of working on yourself is quite key. Work on yourself so that when you do eventually get married, if you will get married, because not all of us will, and that's okay. When you do, you're a whole person, ready to marry another whole person than to try and get fixed by someone else. So that is our last word. So thank you so much for this. I know we didn't touch then the issue of, in the meantime, dating and all of that, but maybe that's a conversation for another time. But I think we need to just finish off there to say, whether you're married or whether you're single, God still loves you and you're a whole person and he has a purpose for you at this point in time in your life, and rather maximize on that. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time. And a reminder that we are doing a countdown. Season 1 is coming to an end by end of this month. So please continue the conversation online, and we'll see you next week.
That everything's gonna be alright. Trust in Jesus, trust in God.
Everything's gonna be alright.
Bambelela, Guzolunga.
Everything's gonna be alright.
Everything's gonna be alright, my friend. Everything's gonna be alright, my friend. That everything's gonna be alright. Oh, that everything's gonna be alright. Trust in Jesus, it's gonna be alright. Just hold on, hold on. Everything, it's gonna be alright.